There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Sean Breeze Books. Welcome back to my channel and another Friday Reads. I missed last week because I was sick and I'm now, I think, 98% recovered. January was basically a wash for me, but really all I'm dealing with now is the antibiotics are just wiping me out. I got a few more days left and I should be fully back. Anyway, I'm really glad to be doing a Friday Reads, and I'm glad that I'm feeling better because I got a big birthday weekend coming up. It's my 60th birthday on Saturday. Oh my God, where does the time go? Haven't I had this BookTube channel since I was about 23? And it's going to be a festive weekend. The weather is going to be horrifically cold, but I do have relatives coming from Alberta for the festivities. There's a family dinner on Saturday night at the same Saskatoon hotel where Kenji and I had our wedding banquet. Then I'm having a house party on Sunday afternoon, going hopefully into the evening, hopefully late into the evening with a bunch of bookish friends. So it's going to be great. And just so you know, it's going to be dastardly cold with the wind chill today, about minus 40, minus 42 Celsius. It's going to be almost that cold on the weekend. We got lots to tell you, and let's get started. I had a fabulous and unexpectedly fabulous biblioadventure last night. Mum and Sharon Batala and I went to a book launch for a book we weren't sure what the book was really going to be about. Even though we read the description, we'd never heard of the author, and it ended up being absolutely delightful. And that is a memoir by a Regina, Saskatchewan writer called Walking the Bypass by Ken Wilson. And he is a English prof in Regina. This is his first book. And it's based on a blog that he kept of walking the highway around Regina. There was a bypass put in. It's not a heart bypass. A road bypass. A highway that bypasses something. I'll find out when I read the book. But it was mesmerizing to hear him talk about this. He's one of those academics that actually talks in a way that there's something visceral to grab a hold of, which is a very rare commodity based on my experience with academics and a half-hearted attempt of my own to become one 100 years ago. He wanted to get a perspective on his home, which is Regina, and Saskatchewan, as a settler Canadian by walking these highways outside of Regina and walking 70 kilometers in a day or something. It was really long walks, and journaling or blogging, now writing a book about his experience, making a non-place into a place and ruminating on settler colonialism, environmental issues, personal issues, and it just sounds amazing. I never imagined hearing about somebody walking on highways would be so fascinating. Historically, there's an Indian industrial school cemetery there. That is where unmarked graves were found of all the children that we killed because we didn't take care of them when we stole them from their parents. And he read from the prologue about his many visits to that cemetery. There was no markers until very recently. Or maybe he said there will be markers finally put there in the near future. And there's a passage that he read to us that just stopped me in my tracks. That I can't find flipping through the book now, but boy, I can't wait to get into this. It's an unusual kind of memoir that has captured my imagination, and what an interesting man Ken Wilson is. I'll put a link. The bookstore has a simultaneous Zoom thing, and it's available on YouTube after the live event, so I'll put a link to that, and you can have a peek at it yourself, because the production values of that videotaping thing have increased a lot recently. All right, I finished a bunch of books. Let's see, I finished 3 books. I guess I'll talk about them in the order that I finished them. I finished this 2025 American novel called The Imagined Life by Andrew Porter. This was a pseudo-buddy read with Angelia of Read and Reread. We had a lovely Zoom chat today. We decided not to record it for public consumption, but just have a private chat, and that enhanced my understanding of the book and my reaction thereto. Oh, before I go any further, you know what? I got a flawed edition of the book. It didn't bother me too much, although I do want Amazon. or the publisher to send me a copy that has all the pages. It's almost 300 pages, and mine jumps from page 183 to 217 with pages maybe 57 to 92 or something repeated twice in the book. So I'm missing 40, 50 pages. I don't know what. I haven't figured out the math, but I had the audiobook, so I got along without those pages. But I've never had a book that was so messed up as this one. And if you Google it, there are quite a few copies with that misprint. So I'm waiting for a email back from Penguin Random House. And this one was a bit of a miss for me, I have to say. I didn't really like it. I didn't hate it. There were parts of it I hated. So I haven't decided on a star rating, which is weird for me. I usually have a star rating before I've even finished the last few pages of the book. But this one I'm going to mull over for a few days. Uncharacteristically. It's talked about quite a bit on Book 2. You will find much more glowing reviews of it elsewhere, but I thought it was a failure. It's about a California man who was abandoned by his father when he was 12. His father was a brilliant academic who had mental health issues, perhaps addiction issues, and then he disappears after a scandal at his college. He doesn't get tenure. I thought the childhood scenes were really well done. Beautiful writing, very vivid, and the 12-year-old perspective on these very adult experiences that his parents were mired in and that were destroying his father's mental health before his very eyes. It was really touching, lusciously described. As a 52 or 53-year-old creative writing instructor, his wife and 9-year-old boy leave him or kick him out of the house. One of the things I hated about the adult part of the story was we don't really get any details about anything until some near the end. But he goes on a quest to find out what happened, and Andrew Porter just absolutely botched that part. He just botched it. The sections where adult Stephen is going to meet and interview his father's ex-colleagues and his one uncle, his father's brother, the writing is crappy, the descriptions are flat, and the dialogue is so mundane and so repetitive. It was like a copy and paste, this question and that question, and nobody had any answers for him. That was so boring. Why did he do that? I really hated that half of the novel. It was so poorly executed. Oh my god, it was a disaster. I'm one of the few people who had this reaction. You'll probably see comments on this video saying that people disagree utterly with my critique, but I thought it stank, that part. And it was really repetitive. Like we revisit the scene that opens the novel. I read it to you a few weeks ago in the book hall. It's really well done in the opening paragraphs where he tells his wife he's going on this journey, and his wife says, "Be careful, maybe you don't want to know any more about your father." But then that scene is repeated 2 more times in the novel. Apparently he is really well known as a short story writer, and this read like a short story that was padded to make a 300-page novel. It really could have been a 150-page novella or something, or a 70-page short story, because the childhood sections were to die for, and the last couple chapters were awesome. But there's all this stuff about him looking this guy up, and this guy won't answer his email. The character work in the modern day sections reads like a poorly written freelance article. You read a profile in a magazine, and the writer takes you into the movie star's house and tells you what he serves you for coffee and what kind of cups they are. And that's the kind of crap that was almost embarrassing to read. It's got all this therapy crap in it. I'm not saying that therapy can't be useful, but the way he writes about therapy and the therapy speak he puts in people's mouths is just horrible to read. Oh my god. All that was missing was taking the protagonist to an inner child workshop. He ruined what in other parts of it was a fabulously literary novel by putting all that Oprah shit in it. So, a real mixed bag for me. I will eventually, in about 30 years, when I'm 64, maybe try one of his short stories, but I'm not quite sure what the fuss was about with this one. Could have been great if it had been 150 pages. Stripped out all the crap, but there was too much crap in it for me to say that it's worth you trying if you haven't already. A fair bit more successfully, I finally finished something I started for Women in Translation in August of 2025. A collection of Palestinian short stories. It's called Out of Time by Samira Azzam, translated from the Arabic by Ranya, Abdelrahman. I've been reading it at a very leisurely pace. Like so many short story collections, there were some that I really enjoyed and some that I found really boring. It was a bit of a mixed bag. The stories that I enjoyed, I did enjoy, but there was a lot of them that I just could barely finish. The stories that didn't really work for me were about one character who barely got a name and not a lot of background to that person and not a lot of interaction with other characters. Those stories fell flat for me. My favorite one was about I think an orphan niece and two aunts that think they have a chance of marrying her off to the rich neighbor next door. They hadn't been treating her very well. It almost had a fairy tale-like quality, like Cinderella or something. But then when they realize she might bring riches to them if they can get her hitched, they start treating her like a princess, and then the story takes another turn and there's a reversal. And that was probably my favorite one. Some of the later stories, probably written in the 60s, have a lot to do with the removals and fencing and all the horrible stuff that Israel has been doing to Palestinian people, but going way back even before 1960s, and those had a complexity to them that was really interesting. I'm glad I read it, but I probably won't remember anything about it by this time next year. The book that I loved this week was The Squire, a 1938 novel by Enid Bagnold. Enid Bagnold is the author of National Velvet, which I believe was made into one of Elizabeth Taylor's first movies. This is a novel about the lady of a noble estate in the UK. I assume it's set in the 1930s or thereabouts. She's heavily pregnant with her fifth child, and her husband's in India. It's portrayed as a really loving marriage, but he's often away in India, so there's that colonial thing, and there's the class thing that people could get all exercised about, and should. But what I loved about it was it's lush, very literary, the kind of writing that some people might really hate, but when it's done well, I love. It reminded me most of all of Virginia Woolf. And you know what I found just last night? Margaret Jabal wrote of this, maybe she reviewed it or something. I found this in another Goodreads review. Imagine To the Lighthouse, narrated by Mrs. Ramsay expecting her fifth child. The portrayal of the four children is so rich in a way that I didn't think of To the Lighthouse, but I don't remember the children in To the Lighthouse as well as I do in The Waves. Those four characters, we see them as children and then into older age, and it's really hard to distinguish what age they are throughout the novel. That's my memory of The Waves, but there's a deeply literary, almost something mythical, not myth retelling, but there's a mythicality, is that a word, to the way these children are portrayed. It is a deep portrayal of childbirth and mothering that I think was revolutionary for its time. It's not explicit, but she's just days away from having her kid. Her husband's in India, and she's such an old hat at this that she's got the same midwife that delivered the other four children, and she's not worried about it at all, and she's got a household of servants to look after and all kinds of shenanigans going on with the servants, which was really enjoyable to read. She's 44 years old, so she's the squire while her husband's away. She's never named other than that. And that's a bit weird and maybe unnecessary, but she is a devoted mother. And it's celebratory and deeply reflective. She's a very contemplative person. She has a friend visiting, Caroline, who's a bit of a socialite, who's based on Lady Cynthia Asquith. If you look her up, she had a fascinating life. A bit younger than our protagonist, the Squire, and still having all these love affairs and stuff. The Squire is remembering that just before she got married and started having a family, she was as embroiled with all that love and sex stuff as her friend still is. Lots of reminiscences and contemplative reflection on where she's at and how much she loves being a mother. And I suppose you could do a feminist analysis of it, but I think what you should do instead is just sink into this. It's got a 3.55 rating on Goodreads, so it's not everybody's cup of tea, but it sure the heck was mine. Oh my God, did I enjoy this. I'm going to read you a paragraph from the Squire to give you a taste of the writing. This is really, the core of the book is all in this one paragraph. But the Squire sat and sat, thinking. The children, seeds on the face of the earth, grew with an electric life. They burst under her eyes. The shoots came up like lances, with a buzz of growing. One in her womb, one in the womb of his babyhood. Boniface in the womb and tangle of his own mind. Jay and Lucy out and away. Jay and Lucy running, bright and clear. Jay with his sweet face, light hair turning brown, his arrogance, flushing tempers, pride and reasonableness. Lucy with deep-struck roots like Boniface, and like her mother, one eye cocked on the passage of time, hanging fire, watching, paling. I'm 10. I've done a 7th part of my life. H.G. Wells said of the Squire that the book made him feel as though he'd been thrown into a washing basket full of used nursery napkins. That automatically makes it a 5-star read for me. The last fun fact about Enid Bagnold is that she is the great-grandmother of former British Prime Minister David Cameron's wife. I'm going to wave 3 books at you that I've started and give you a little bit of a sense. Belinda by Maria Edgeworth. I'm really enjoying it. Audio-text combo. And I'm going to be discussing this with Amy of Zoe Beck at the end of February. I hope I can meet that deadline. It's published in 1801. I don't think I've ever read anything by Maria Edgeworth. A scheming aunt who's already married off 4 of her nieces. The 5th niece she sends to her friend in London, hoping she'll meet a rich husband. The friend in London is a bit of a schemer, and she and her husband are always fighting. The language is lush, the language is lovely, and I think I'm going to have a good time with this. If you joined my Patreon in time, you can be part of the book club discussion at the end of January. Our next book club book is this Sudanese novel, A Mouthful of Salt, by Reem Gaafar. Reem Gaafar was my mystery guest. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. I am only 2 chapters in, doing it also as an audio-text combo. It's starting out extremely interestingly. Joe Smith and I have done 4 chapters of this book, Relearning to Read, Adventures in Not Knowing by Anne Morgan. Anne Morgan is a British novelist, and she also has a read around the world type of blog, and it's her experiences of reading books from around the world and connecting with other readers around the world on that webpage, readingaroundtheworld.com or something. I'll put the correct link in the show notes. These essays, they're not guides to how to read better, but just to give you some things to think about. And Joe and I, both of whom read a lot of international literature. I would say Joe more than I, but I'm no slouch in that department. Challenging, thought-provoking, a lot of stuff that's just confirmation of how we read already, but other things that are an invitation to become more comfortable with reading stuff we don't fully understand and not shying away from reading, continuing to read, not giving up. And I'm somebody who bails on things if I don't like it, and I do it less. I bail a whole lot less than I used to back in the early days of Sean the Book Maniac. She's coaxing me to become more comfortable with reading stuff that I don't fully understand, and that's going to be really valuable. So Joe and I are looking forward to continuing with this. Editing Sean here. I completely botched my announcement in this part of the video about a book that I'll be starting in the coming week, because the book was in the basement. I didn't have the energy to go all the way down and all the way back to bring up the book, and I couldn't for the life of me remember the title or the author. So it was just a disaster. So I'm going to redo it. I don't know how many years I've been talking about wanting to read this book. Anytime I do a tag that says what a book that you're really looking forward to in the coming year or whatever, this is the one. And finally, I'm going to fit it in. I'm going to read this to Mary Jean. We're almost finished the David Carpenter novel, and then I'm going to read her this British novel that was published in 2023. It's called The Way the Day Breaks by David Roberts. I love the cover, and it is a novel set in the late 80s about family, love, memory, and mental illness. It's going to be a challenging book to listen to and actually a challenging book to read aloud because there are no quotation marks, which is something that I love, but it does make it a little tricky to figure out because I do voices when I read and which character's speaking and who is speaking and all that, but it's going to be fun, and I just have had a really good feeling about this novel that I've never heard anybody else on BookTube talk about. It's a debut novel, and David Roberts is a Sheffield-based writer. Can't wait. All right, it's time for a book haul. The first one is this interesting memoir, which I think would resonate with the memoir whose book launch I went to last night. A Flat Place by Noreen Masood. She is a Pakistani-British academic writer, and she was my mystery guest. This is her memoir about why flat geography speaks to her soul. And the word soul makes it sound like it's going to be airy-fairy, and I don't think it's that at all. But the geography of where she was from in Pakistan, she finds that she's not comfortable in the UK unless she's in similar geography. Shortlisted for the Women's Prize Nonfiction 2024. I'm noticing with nonfiction books that the opening paragraph doesn't have a standalone kind of vitality, whereas if I go further into the book, I can usually find a paragraph. That paragraph was at the end of the introduction, so let me read that to you. If I wanted to learn to rest in the wider world, the world which feels spiky and strange, which hurts like a carpet burn and forces me into feeling, I had to learn to share what doesn't want to be shared, what vanishes when I dig the bones up and drag them into the light. To trust that the thoughts and the traumatized memories which translate for me into flat landscapes might exist as more than a private, unreachable image. So I began a series of journeys across landscapes which I felt, however absurdly, were somehow attuned to me, and might somehow offer answers. A language which honors instead of denying my love of numbed, inanimate things, my flat feelings, my memories of a flat life. I spoke to Ken Wilson about this book, and he was very interested in it, and now I have a kind of fantasy about bringing them together for a Zoom chat on each other's memoirs in due course. We'll see. Here is a trans novel that I've heard very little about, but what I've heard about made me buy it. It's a 2025 novel by an American writer who lives in Los Angeles with her family. Woodworking by Emily St. James. The protagonist, Erica, is in her mid-30s, recently divorced, and trans. She's a teacher. And a 17-year-old trans student enters her life. It's a story of friendship, not of romance, as far as I can tell, but it's a friendship that is very transformative for her. And I'm going to read the first two paragraphs. At the beginning of the second paragraph, there is a gray highlight over her dead name, and I can't produce that effect using Canva, at least I don't know how to, so instead I've just got a space with square brackets around it in lieu of that gray cover-up graphic, okay? This is Erica, Monday, September 12th. Erica didn't know any other trans women, so when she learned Abigail Hawkes had called everyone in her current events class a bunch of fascist cunts, Erica switched attention duty slots with Hank DeWard to be able to talk to Abigail one-on-one. Whatever, Hank said. Since she had chosen the name Erica for herself in a frenzy on a baby name website, Erica's old name had come to sound like it was enveloped in fog. It was very far away from her now, somewhere out at sea. Hank dumped 3 packets of salt into his steaming lean cuisine. Go ahead, take all my slots as far as I'm concerned. And here is David Carpenter's latest published book. It's a short story collection called Hello, and that's a great cover. New short fiction by David Carpenter. I was at the book launch for this. Here is the opening paragraph from the first story called The Ethel Suite. This is section 1, and it's dated 1983, early September. He raises his head from a deep slump in roughly the shape of a question mark. Dozing in a chair after lunch can't be good for the neck. He blinks out at the bleary sky and glances at the phone because it's almost time. He'll wait another 20 minutes before he dials. By then, she should be home from the airport. Funny word, dial. A persistent word. The new phones have musical buttons, but you still dial people up. These days, your phone number becomes your song. In the grand scheme of things, this call will rank as one of a billion in the mundane lives of people with nothing better to do. Nevertheless, there is an urgency to this call. For him, these days, the phone, the annoying, black, impersonal, square-button, jangly phone, is a lifeline. I talked to Dave Carpenter on the phone quite a bit, and yes, he does not have a cell phone, and I'm looking forward to where that story goes. And the last one for today is the first volume of the Cazalet Chronicles, The Light Years by Elizabeth Jane Howard. I'm going to be buddy reading this with my Elizabeth Jane Howard groupie, buddy reader, Leah in Calgary, in April, I think. And you can get various editions of it. This is my favorite. I like the cover of this one better than some of the other ones. Opening paragraph. The setting is Lansdowne Road, 1937. The day began at 5 to 7 when the alarm clock, given to Phyllis by her mother when she started service, went off and on and on and on until she quenched it. Edna, in the other creaking iron bed, groaned and heaved over, hunching herself against the wall. Even in summer she hated getting up, and in the winter Phyllis sometimes had to haul the bedclothes off her. Phyllis sat up, unclipped her hairnet, and began undoing her curlers. It was her half day, and she'd washed her hair. She got out of bed, picked the eiderdown off the floor where it had fallen in the night, and drew the curtains. Sunlight refurbished the room, making toffee of the linoleum, turning the chips on the white enamel washstand jug slate blue. She unbuttoned her winceyette nightdress and washed as her mother had taught her to do, face, hands, and, circumspectly, under her arms, with a flannel dipped in the cold water. "Get a move on," she said to Edna. She poured her slops into the pail and began to dress. She removed her nightdress and, in her underclothes, slipped on her dark green cotton morning dress. She put her cap over her unbrushed-out sausage curls and tied the apron round her waist. Edna, who washed much less in the mornings, managed to dress while still half in bed, a relic of the winter. There was no heat in the room, and they never in their lives opened the window. By 7:10 they were both ready to descend quietly through the sleeping household. Phyllis stopped on the first floor and opened a bedroom door. She drew the curtains and heard the budgerigar shifting impatiently in his cage. All right, that's my Friday Reads. Thanks for watching.